Hello everyone, I'm Hugh from Loxon and I'm here to show you the solution to our earlier config challenge. So just to give you all a quick reminder, what we had earlier was a scenario, fairly typical scenario, where we have a customer in their house. They have a triple click in their bedroom to activate night mode, which turns off all lights, stops all the music, disables all the motion sensor in the bedroom motion sensors, etc., etc., etc. That's great for them, but it doesn't work well for their children because, of course, they don't want their children to turn off the whole house and their children go to bed earlier. So they have children that go to bed at 7 p.m. and they want to have the ability to have a children's night mode so that when they've gone to bed, the house behaves differently. So what we've got, when they enable night mode in each of the children's bedrooms, they want the lights and music to go off and the motion sensors to be disabled, but only in that child's bedroom. They want on the landing an evening lighting mood to come on through motion instead of the normal everyday lighting mood. And finally, they want the doorbell to be disabled so it no longer rings over the speakers when either of the children are in bed. And then the extra little bit to the challenge was that sometimes their kids don't do what they're told and they stay up, mess around with their switch, turn lights on, turn music on. So they want to have their switch disabled when those children are in bed. And then finally, the little boy, he sometimes sleepwalks. So he'll leave his room, he'll go walk down, and nobody notices until he's made it into the lounge. So the last bit is that if the door for his room opens while he's supposed to be in bed, a push notification gets sent to the parents so they know about it. Brilliant. Let's get configuring it. So just because I'm sure that you don't want to see my top of my head while I'm doing all this, I'm just going to turn my camera off so that we're focusing purely on my screen in front of me. So I'm just going to head over to config. Now what I've done is I have just run through the default project planning file that's in Loxon config, so that default 3-bedroom file, and then I've run auto configuration on it because we already know that the parents want to use the triple click for the bedroom to activate night mode, and we know that auto config gives us all of that anyway. So the first step we need to do is, if we actually take a look at the master bedroom, we'll see that there's a note telling us to define our logic so that the lights don't get brought on unintentionally through the night. And that's actually because motion sensors aren't disabled in bedrooms by default during night mode, because there might not be a motion sensor, there might be a second motion sensor under the bed that wants to work. There's a few different things in play. So if we do just want to disable the lights in the bedroom at night mode, what we do is we take the operating mode of night and we put that into the input dism in the master bedroom. And I'll show you where that comes from in a second. So the next bit is night mode for each of the children's bedrooms. So the first thing we need to do is we need to actually make sure that neither of the children's bedrooms can actually activate the house into night mode. And on auto config, on the whole house page, there is a block on here called night. And that is what determines that night operating mode coming on, as well as all of the lights in the house turning off, all of the music turning off in the house, etc., etc., etc. So the first thing we need to do is make sure that only the master bedroom memory flag can turn this switch block on. So we need to get rid of those 2 memory flags, and we also need to get rid of them from here as well, so that now only the master bedroom can actually activate night mode. The second thing we need to do is we need to go into each of the children's rooms. And as you can see, I've named the rooms as James and Lucy. Those are the 2 children. And we also need to make sure that their alarm clocks can't take the house back out of night mode. So that's step number 1. So now only the master bedroom can actually activate that night mode for the whole house and take it back out, or a pulse at 8 AM, whichever happens first. So let's now get on to the kids' individual night modes so that their lights and music go off and their motion sensors are disabled. Simplest way to do this is to head back over to this block here and to simply copy and paste it. So we need to take this block and probably the Pulsat as well, because we want to have, just in case nothing else turns night mode off, something does. Copy those and move them over to the kids' rooms, paste. Now the first thing we're going to have to do is we're going to have to change the room that this switch is in, because it will still be in whole house by default. So this needs to go into James's room. I probably also want to rename this to James is in bed, because otherwise it's going to get very, very confusing looking at this on the app. As you can see, the Pulsat is still in there. That's like if nothing else has brought the house out of night mode or nothing else has brought the room out of night mode, that does it regardless. And so what we then need is we need our thing that turns this block on and what turns this block off. So what turns this block on is somebody triple clicking on James's switch. And the reason we're going to use a triple click, even though we said in the challenge, in the document, that they go to bed at 7 p.m, is because they go to bed at 7 p.m. now when they're 3 and 5 years old, but that won't always be true. So if we use the triple click, but only from their room, then this config stays with them no matter how old they get. So a triple click in their room is going to turn this switch block on. And then if we want, we can use their alarm clock if an alarm gets set for them to turn that switch block back off again. So now we need their lights and music to go off. Best way to do that is on this switch block, you have Q on, which is a rising edge pulse. So a pulse gets sent on the rising edge of this block. So we take that and that will trigger R on the lighting controller, and it will also trigger R on the music. So that turns the lights and the music off when you triple click. Brilliant. And then the last bit on that first thing that we need to do is that the motion sensor in their room needs to be disabled. The best way to do that is to actually create an entirely new operating mode for them. So as well as having this general night operating mode, we also want to have an operating mode for James and for Lucy. So we're going to have James's night mode, and we're also going to have Lucy's night mode. And then James's night mode is going to be activated from this switch block. So the Q is the permanent on, which activates James's night mode. That night mode is then going to be pulled out again onto the lighting controller to dis-M to disable the motion sensor. And again, now that we've done that note disappears. So that is how we do all of that that's under the details, the requirements. So lights off, music off, motion sensor disabled. That's how we do that first paragraph there. So just going to do it in Lucy's room as well. So again, we need that switch block. That switch block needs to be in Lucy's room. The triple click from the lighting needs to turn this switch block on, and then the alarm clock or a pulse at a specific time can turn that block back off. The rising edge will turn off the music and will also turn off the lights. And then we also need the operating mode. So Lucy's night mode onto Q. And then that is also going to go onto dis-M of the lighting controller to disable the motion sensor. And that note disappears. Excellent. So that's lights off, music off, motion sensor disabled in each of their rooms. So that's a triple click from either one of their rooms. The next bit is in the landing, we need an evening lighting mood to be triggered on motion when either of them is in bed instead of the usual everyday lighting mood. So in the landing, the lighting controller, we need to double click. And the first thing we need to do is actually have an everyday and an evening mood. So there's our everyday mood. It's going to be white and it's going to be nice and bright. And that can go up the list. Can have a high priority. We also need our evening mood. This one, still going to be white, but can be a little bit more on the warm white spectrum so that it doesn't wake the kids up. And that can be dimmer, maybe about 50%. Again, that one can happily sit up the list as well. And then what we want to do is under the automatic tab, we can actually change this to say that during any active operating mode, we go to everyday on motion. House night operating mode still wants to go to the night mood on motion. But more importantly, we also want to have 2 extra options here on the list that have a higher priority than night. And these are going to be for each of the kids. So youngest kid first, and then the second. And then that is going to be the evening mood on motion. And that is going to be only used if previously all off. So that is how we do motion sensors at certain times from motion being detected based on operating modes. So now if either one of them is in bed and the motion sensor in the hall triggers, it will instead go to the evening mood. And then the final bit on this is that the doorbell is to be disabled and no longer ring over the speakers when either one of the kids are in bed. Now the way we have to do this is firstly, we have to find where we have our intercom configured, which is just here. And really importantly, cannot be done from the intercom block. So if you double click on the intercom, on the intercom block, you cannot dictate what time these music zones go off. So what you need to do is we need to actually remove them from the intercom block so that they aren't triggered within the block itself. And what we actually need is a completely new music overview block. Music overview block is then going to have those links, those rooms linked, so only the rooms that we want the music to come out of when somebody presses the intercom, like that. And then what we're going to do is we are going to take QB, which is the bell button from the intercom, and we're going to put that into the bit of logic that says that the bell has to be pressed and it's not night mode. So that's going to start with an AND block and QB. So that's going to be our first bit. And the second bit is going to be the night modes. So we then need to take both Lucy and James's night mode out. And really importantly, because we need to say that it's and not that, we should put both of those through an OR block first. So Lucy or James into there, and then the output from here should go into the input BE, which if I hover over, when on, plays playback of doorbell. So that is that little bit of logic. So the doorbell has to be pressed and not in either one of these night modes. That will then trigger the doorbell. Wonderful. That is the main part of that config done. So that is motion disabled in the master bedroom during night mode. And in both of the kids' rooms, what we've got is their triple click from RAQ will turn this switch block on. When it goes on, a pulse will be sent to the lighting and the music to turn them off. And this night mode will also get activated. During that night mode, the motion sensor will be disabled on the lighting controller, and then a pulse at a specific time, by default 8 AM, or their alarm clock will take this room back out of night mode. So the extra little bits then. So firstly, Kids don't always do what they're told, and sometimes they are going to want to play around in their room when they should have gone to bed. So the first thing we need to do is we need to make sure that they can't mess around with anything, specifically lights, music, and shading. Now, the best way to do this is on any block where you've got switch inputs, like a lighting controller, like a music server zone, or like an automatic blinds block. You've also got an input DIS, which is child lock, which locks the inputs on switches, but not from the app. So you would take DIS, and then we could actually just take this night mode straight out again into DIS. So night mode into DIS of the lighting, into DIS of the shading, and into DIS of the music as well. So Lucy's night mode, music, DIS. Child lock locks inputs, and we'll do that for James as well. So that then, when it's their night mode, prevents that switch from working. DIS, DIS, and DIS. And then the final bit that we need to do is little boy, James, he sleepwalks. So we need to make sure that if he leaves his room when he's supposed to be in bed, that we get a push notification to let us know, and then we can go put him back to bed. So what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to have some logic that says that it's obviously his night mode, which again, we've got his night mode, so we know that. And we're also going to need to know the information from a door contact as well. So I've got just an input labeled as door contact here. Those are the two bits we're going to need. And what we need to say is if his night mode is active and his door gets opened, send a notification. So we are going to need an AND block. And the other thing to consider about a door contact is that a door contact is normally closed going open, so we would also need to invert this. And then on the end of it, we would need to put our push notification. There we go. Push notification, James is out of bed. And then we would put that on there, and message went on. That could again tell us in the app or on our phones, James is out of bed. However, there's one extra little thing to consider, and that is kids are notorious for when you put them to bed, they don't go straight to sleep. At least 5 times over the next half an hour, they will cry out to you because they can't find their favorite toy, or they want you to read them a bedtime story, or they have something to tell you. So we're going to be in and out of that room probably for the next half an hour or so. And of course, if we do this little bit of logic as well, it also means that if we triple click, we're instantly going to set this push notification off because the switch is on the inside of the room. So what we need to do is we actually need to delay this contact. So we need to do something like a switch on delay that this contact goes into. And again, we can invert it there and then take the inversion off there. And we could set that for 1800 seconds, which is 30 minutes. And then that goes into the AND block instead. In fact, just to make it a little bit neater, with a reference, it goes into the AND block. And that would be the best way of doing that. So that now means that it's 30 minutes after the night mode gets activated before that opening of the door will come into effect. And then just to show you all of this, probably the best way is if I go ahead and save all of this into the mini server that's next to me. I'm not going to be able to show you it live on the mini server as I just do not have enough switches. I only have one single touch switch and we need to show different ones by different rooms. But what I can do when that loads in is I can open up in the web browser our web interface and show you this on here instead. So on here you can currently see these are the global options. So the house night currently not on. And then in each of the kids' bedrooms, James's room, they have their own night mode. And so what we could do is if we're in James's room and we turn his lights on and then we put him to bed and his switch gets activated. I need to set a user interface password for, as it requires a second level of authentication. That will then turn off his lights, turn off his music, etc., etc. And what we can also do, while that's just saving in, is if we start simulation, this is a great thing about simulation, is the ability to actually simulate things through time. So if I start simulation now and I close that contact, so this is how a door contact would normally appear to you if you were in live view. It would show as closed if the door was closed because it's closed going open. And you can see that this is currently not on. And if I open the door, you can see that this is currently still not on. And that's because it's got that half an hour, 1800 seconds switch on delay. But what you can do in simulation is if I pause this, and I can then untick that and change the time. Let's go to an hour in the future and then press it again. You can see that it's taken into account that amount of time that the door would have been open for. And you can see that it is showing that the door is now open. And then if I go up here and I go ahead and triple click, you can see that both of these are now true, which means that James is out of bed and the push notification is active. And we can see this in the app as well. If I go into James's room, his lights are currently on relaxing, trigger his night mode, and his lights turn off. And that is our entire scenario sorted. Only their room is being adjusted by their triple click, but the landing will go to dimmer lights because, again, we have said in the automatic tab here that if either one of their night modes is on, it goes to evening mood on motion. So that bit's done. The doorbell won't ring over the speakers while they're in bed, which we can see over here. So you can see that's currently true. James's night mode is currently active, which means that if the doorbell were to go off, nothing would happen. And then also we've disabled the switches through the DIS input, and we've also defined that little bit of logic there for James that makes sure that if he starts sleepwalking, it sends a notification. And that is all of those scenarios solved. Thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed, and I will see you again for our next challenge. Goodbye.